My name is Michael. I'm a junior at Columbia, and I've been doing test prep and college admissions work for about 2 years now. I started after I got into school, and I realized, I'd been thinking about college admissions for 4 years. It kind of feels like such a waste to let that kind of, just go away after I got in somewhere. Because I also thought a lot about how I did and what I did well, and also what I, made a mistake on and could have done better. So I know there's a lot to talk about, but today what I wanted to talk to y'all about was mainly about the concept of a narrative and storytelling. Over time, admissions rates on all different types of schools have gone down, whether it's, your fancy name schools or your state schools like the University of Connecticut, liberal arts schools, all admission rates going down. With the number of people getting accepted, the numerator staying constant, but the number of people applying, the denominator growing and growing and growing and growing. And part of that's a good thing, right? So I do a podcast with my old teacher from high school. It's called Admissions Uncovered. And when he applied, he literally applied with a typewriter. Like when he told me, I was like, what? Are you serious? I thought that was centuries ago, but no. He's 60 years old. He applied with a typewriter. And now we obviously don't, right? We apply online, we apply with a Common App. We can apply to up to 20 schools for a common application. And so that means everybody is just applying to a whole bunch of different places, and admissions officers seeing a whole bunch of different applications. And everybody kind of feels and looks the same now, right? Even if you have a great SAT score, lots of people have 1600. You do debate, great, lots of people do debate. You do DECA, great, lots of people do DECA, right? And kind of standing out is the big question. So that's what I mean by crafting a narrative. I think the way to stand out, so there's maybe two ways to stand out. One is the nearly impossible way to stand out, which is your parents are rich donors. You won some fancy science fair competition that's international. You founded a nonprofit that cured cancer. Okay. I'm also going to go out way on a limb and guess that none of y'all are those three things. That's okay, right? They, each college still has to admit, 1,500 people into their freshman class. Each college cannot admit 1,500 international first place winners. There's not enough first place winners of a science fair competition. So a lot of people get into these schools who are average, who are just like a typical high schooler doing typical high school things. But I think what they have done to get into that school is really be reflective about what they do in high school, really be purposeful about what they have done in high school, and really intentional in how they presented that in relation to what they want to study, what they want to do in the future. That's what I mean by a narrative. It's taking what you've done and connecting it to what you want to do in college and want to do in the future. That makes you seem like a really reflective and well thought out applicant. Because the opposite of that is someone who just applies as, okay, I got a 1600 in my SAT, I did a couple of extracurricular activities, I volunteered, my teachers think I'm all right, but they're just going to say I'm a good student because I didn't really do that much outside of class besides maybe a science fair competition or two, whatever, right? Think about what I've just told you. It sounds really, really random, right? Sounds like this person just did whatever the heck they wanted to in high school rather than being intentional and making some decisions, some choices. You don't want to be that. Instead, you want to be the person where the admissions officers are like, Lydia is an X type of applicant. She has done X, Y, and Z in high school, and that makes sense because they want to do A, B, and C in the future. Really something tight, connected, almost like a thesis statement for an essay. Now, I use this word narrative kind of purposefully, right? Because narratives are not just something used for college applications. They're like stories. They're like fairy tales. They're the books you read for school. They're Harry Potter. They're Hunger Games. They're, like Diary of a Wimpy Kid. They're stories with arcs that are fun, that are interesting, that have challenges, that have characters that rise above the difficulties. You want your college application to be like these fairy tales rather than your history textbook. You want them to be interesting like these Disney movies rather than boring and dry like your science textbook. And so here's how you do that. I think there are kind of three main things when it comes to a narrative for college applications. Purpose, we talked about it up top, is kind of the definition of a narrative, right? Making yourself seem like a purposeful candidate. The next part, though, is character development, and the character is obviously you here. If you think about all the interesting books and movies and media you like, it's never someone who's super successful and remains super successful throughout the film. That's boring, right? They've stayed the same. Then I could have just watched the first 5 minutes of the movie and got it all, right? So why do I have a full 2 hours? You want to show change and growth in high school. You want to have started out as something, gone through some stuff, worked out some things, did some hard work, and then ended up something else, or ended up better, or ended up different, right? You want to show some character development throughout that. And that means having a purpose and having a goal and showing how you've kind of snaked and weaved your way to that goal throughout high school. And this third element is a little bit ambiguous, obviously, but it's a little bit of drama, right? And this comes into play when you write your essays. A lot of people just like write resume length things. They're like, oh, I did X in freshman year, and then in sophomore year I did Y, and then but in sophomore year I did win a second place award. That was pretty cool. And then in junior year I continued doing that that activity and got a first place award at the competition. I'm really, really proud of all the work That's a snooze fest, right? Y'all are falling asleep. I'm falling asleep saying it. That's not interesting, right? When you want to write your essay, when you want to write your application, you need to spice it up a little bit. You need to like draw in those details. Think honestly, like if you have a favorite book, like if you have Harry Potter on your shelves, or if you have Hunger Games or whatever, like pick it up and read the first paragraph. It's always this like really descriptive, inviting thing. That's the element of drama here. So these are the three things in a narrative. And today I want to focus on purpose and character development, because those kind of give you a big picture, high level overview of your application, right? What's your goal with your application? What's the thing you want the admissions officer to know about you? And how are you going to show that growth over time? The drama element, that comes later when you're maybe writing your essays, doing those final touches. Now, how do you find the purpose? How do you find the growth in your application? To kind of double back, right? The narrative is the central idea that connects everything that you've done with what you want to do in college and what you want to do in the future. So how do you get there? Well, first you have to list everything that you've already done. So I want everybody to take out like a pen or a pencil or a notepad or I don't know, notes on your phone or whatever, and just start listing everything you've done. Not just extracurricular wise, right? So I put debate, National Honor Society, this was a volunteer organization, orchestra, obviously. I want you to put your interests, like what do you think about, what do you care about, what general topics are you fascinated by? For me, I was really into politics and elections and political data, public policy. Put your future goals. So it was like, okay, maybe I want to go to law school. I don't know, maybe. Put some of your like less academic interests, your truly kind of just like the things you like to do for fun, right? So I was a computer guy, so I really loved reading computer blogs. I love traveling, and there's like a really niche part of the blogosphere that's about frequent flyer miles and how you can get fancy trips for free. I love those blogs. What things do you like to watch? Star Wars. What are like the foods you like? Barbecue. I put public transit on there just because I was like super interested in that for some reason. Podcasts. I love listening to podcasts, right? Put everything down on there that you could possibly think about caring about. Things you do, things you watch, things you listen to, things you want to do in the future. Elements of your background, right? My parents are immigrants. That was a big part of my identity. So just write down everything, and I'll give you, maybe like a minute and a half, 2 minutes to do that. So everybody pull out a piece of paper and just write down everything. And this is only going to work if you actually do it, because like the next 20 minutes are all going to be about this list. So please actually do it. All right, so everybody should have come up with a pretty robust list of everything that you've done, you're interested in. those sorts of things. Now what? Well, I think that there's a lot on your list that you put there because like you've done it, that you're interested in, but maybe some of the things you just did because your friend brought you along to a club meeting, or your mom told you you have to do it in 6th grade, and the inertia of things just let you keep doing it and doing it and doing it. I think some of the things are things that your teachers told you to do. Others you put down because you thought you should have put down and don't actually mean anything to you. And that happens a lot, right? That's just like how high school works. Like we drop into a club meeting and we stay there because our friend is there. Your parents have a lot of control of your lives right now. You do what your parents say sometimes. And so I think because this college application is fundamentally about you and what you have done, what you want to do in college, and what you want to do after college, you have to decide for yourself what actually matters. You want to find what's important. And so here's how I did it, all right? I bolded the things that really matter to me. And it's not that the other things don't matter to me or aren't things that I didn't spend a lot of time on. But when I think about high school, I don't really think about orchestra. It's something I did, it's something I enjoyed doing, but near the latter half, it's not something I really invested in. I really cared about debate. I traveled nationally for it. National Honor Society, I was the president of, and we did a lot of projects volunteer-wise through it. Traveling, I continued to love to travel, and barbecue. When we traveled, we always had to have barbecue, even if it was a city that had awful barbecue, and there's plenty of those in the Northeast. Podcasts, I listen to those every single day, right? They're clearly important to me. So go through, and this should take a little bit less time, so maybe I'll only give it a minute for it. Just go through and like star, mark, bold, whatever that's really, really important to you. If it's not important to you, it's fine. Leave it out. Or if it's just like semi-important, let's just leave it out for the exercise. Cool. So at this point, everybody should have maybe starred or highlighted a couple of important things. So I guess for the sake of time, let's talk about this third step, which is make connections. So here's what I did. Okay, so one thing that I think is really, really useful in order to do this is to think about what you've actually done in these activities, right? So in debate, what did I do? Well, in debate, I did a lot of research topics about politics. And so, you know, that kind of explains why politics, elections, and public policy are on my list, and elections are bolded. What were those topics about? Well, I mean, they generally revolved around inequality. We had a topic about the minimum wage. We had a topic about free speech that got into a lot of like, you know, identity politics issues and like race politics. We had a topic about we had a topic literally about whether we should give foreign aid to the topic said less developed countries, but basically like whether we should give aid to other countries that are poorer than us. Okay, so a lot about inequality. Well, that probably caused some commitment to service or volunteer work, right? Seeing inequity led to volunteering, which is like fairly clearly about helping the less fortunate, right? So that's kind of like a causal connection there, and that also kind of connects up to another activity that might not be bolded, but was another example of volunteer work. Okay, so there's that. I bolded some things here that are kind of more about my interests and less academic, but I think these fit in too, right? So debate, I traveled a lot, and when I traveled, I ate barbecue. So there's that. And I traveled, so I listened to a whole bunch of podcasts. Okay, so I guess if these two things connect to traveling and traveling connects to debate, debate's like a fairly important thing to me. But I have two strands right now. So I have like one strand, debate caused an interest in inequality, and that led to volunteering and politics. It led to an interest in travel, which led to barbecue and podcasts. And right now there's like this kind of thing coming where like, there's like a tree and there's like two little stems coming out, right? I wonder if there's a way to bring together those two stems. Well, when I traveled, I certainly saw inequality, right? I grew up in a really suburban part of Dallas, very, very nice, very, very white. And I traveled to a lot of places that weren't so white and weren't so well off. So I guess there's some stories there that might bring in that connection. The other thing about traveling and traveling for debate even is that I actually switched schools to a school that focused on debate, but this was a school that was kind of like in downtown Dallas, which was a lot more diverse than like a lily white suburb. So okay, that's another kind of like example of connecting debates travel and debates inequality together to like one really cohesive stream. So what can I say about this? Well, I guess I could say that as a debater, I have learned about inequality. As a debater, I have learned about inequality. That's 8 words. I've summarized 4 years of high school, lots of stuff, lots of hard work, lots of tears into 8 words. And it feels strange, right? Because like you didn't talk about any of these other things that you've listed and that you've bolded and that you clearly invested some time in. But you've managed to relate them all back to some central thing about inequality, which came from debate. That's what a narrative is. It's the cohesive statement, the thesis of your application. And so now I want you to find that for yourself. So go ahead, draw some arrows between the things that you've written, whether they're bolded or not, focusing on the bolded ones and see what connections lie, right? So how did one thing lead to another? What did you learn from one thing that helped you with another? Yeah, so go ahead and do that, and I'll give a couple more minutes for this one because it's a little bit more robust thinking, I understand. But I definitely want y'all to keep in mind this process, right? Where you're going from big and broad, all the things that you've done, and you're narrowing it down to some specific things. Okay, so you have this narrative, what do you do with it? Well, you can improve it, right? So if your thing is about fighting inequality, do more things related to fighting inequality, right? Do stuff in the summer, do extracurriculars, do volunteer work. Especially if you're a junior, you still have time. Even if you're going into your senior year, you have the rest of the summer. Do something with it. Start your own project. Whatever. Just whatever you do, try to connect it back to the narrative so that it kind of fits in the framework you've made. What have you done now? You've connected everything together so things aren't so random. What can you do with the narrative in college admissions? Well, it controls your essay, I think. Right? Everybody's like, oh, I don't know what to write about. I don't know what's going to make me special. Oh my God. The narrative is what makes you special because that is the kind of thing that connects everything in your application and makes you to be the really reflective applicant that admissions officers are looking for. So how can you use your narrative to find your essay? What's an example of your narrative, right? If your narrative for me, right, was through debate, I learned about inequality. Well, how did I learn about inequality through debate, right? I wrote about how, because I was traveling for debate, I learned about inequality. What did you do to fight inequality? Well, debate taught me something about how inequality was a big thing in schools. And so through NHS, I did volunteer work for low-income students and tutored them. That's a narrative, that's a connection, and that's a story, a specific moment, right? And so when you're thinking about what to write about for your essay, think about the kind of general statement you created for your narrative that connects all the things together and come up with a specific story that represents that narrative and start there. And so the one other thing I wanted to talk about is your Common App. I know people kind of stress about there only being 10 spots and your description for each extracurricular activity of only 150 words. It's something that I deal with my students a lot. They like panic and they're like, oh my God, I've done so much. I only have 150 characters. What do I do? Well, part of this process, as you have seen today, is making some choices. What is important? What is not? What connects to the thesis and the theme and the narrative? What does not? Right? And so what do you want to put on your Common App? What do you want to highlight on your Common App? What do you want to put first on your Common App? You want to put the activity that showcases the narrative's purpose. How do you describe extracurricular activities in 150 characters? Well, guess what? Some of the boring stuff just doesn't make the cut, right? I founded a nonprofit and filed taxes for it. Big whoop. Nobody has gotten into college because they filed taxes, right? Unless it's somehow your narrative, right? I led a club that, recruited 5 other people and raised $10. Well, that's probably not that impressive. So write about how like we're focused on combating educational equity because that also happens to be your narrative, right? The narrative is also useful because it forces you to make decisions about what is important and what is not, which you have to do because you just have limited space on your common application. So that's the thing I think about it. The kind of like conclusion of today is that college admissions is all about finding a thing, right? A narrative, a thesis, an overall theme that runs throughout all the things you're going to put on your application, all the extracurriculars, your teacher rec letters, your essays, your whatever, right? And once you find that narrative, once you find the kind of like shtick of your high school experience, then everything else needs to be about that thing. So on one hand, it's hard to find the theme, obviously. But once you do, everything else kind of becomes clear, right? Like once I found the theme that through debate, I learned about inequality. What did I write about? Inequality. What were my extracurriculars about? Fighting inequality. What was my major about? It's about economics because I wanted to make public policy to, guess what? Fighting inequality, right? And the last thing I'll also say is that this is not just something for college admissions, right? There's a huge kind of like, I would say, trap of people who go into, especially like top tier universities. Someone mentioned Penn before, Wharton. I think that's certainly one where this happens, where like, like you did well enough in school, blah, 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 blah. You got into a good school, great, 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 great. And then you get there and it's like, okay, what do I do now? Because I have gotten into the good school, like what happens next? And so what ends up, happening is because people don't have, this narrative from before, they end up just like doing what is popular. And so at a lot of certain schools, right, that happens to be like banking and consulting. And like, I have political thoughts about banking and consulting, but the TLDRs, I think they're probably evil. I think for STEM majors, that leads you to be like, okay, I gotta work for like, what's the like next gold star in STEM? For some people, it's like a big pharma company, like Moderna or whatever. And it's like, maybe that is what you want to do. Maybe it isn't, but hopefully you've at least thought about it, right? So I think that independent of getting into college, making these sorts of decisions, figuring out what's important to you can help you in college too, when you're deciding what you want to do. And so that you're not just like lost to the thing that's popular.